たお笑いライブはいかがでしょうか。すぐお答えできます。お笑いライブはいかがでしょうか。
Though we both know it's time, though we both know it's time, it's hard to say goodbye.
We can translate.
Para dijual.
Para meja, tanggal meja.何かわかんない。
Go down twice, yeah. Let a nigga try me. Please don't try me. It's my life, man. It won't go down twice, yeah. Go down twice, yeah. Let a nigga try me. Please don't try. Please don't try me. I know I don't trip, I say shit, but it's all timing.
我上次进条一条道是，也会有很多人就会。
tried reason, I tried blame, I tried patience, I tried space. Ain't got pride left, gave it all away. Now I'm trying.
Look what